This is Jimmy Cabs with the 5150 interview series of Bulldozer Magazine here in lovely Southern California during a rainstorm. I'm here with Lenny Smith of Atriarch. How you doing, Lenny?
I'm doing great, thanks, Jimmy.
How are you enjoying Southern California?
Feels like Oregon.
Yeah, literally.
It's great. Yeah.
This is interesting. Atriarch. There are very few bands that not only are not describable. What I mean by that, it's so easy to classify bands. It's so easy to use words to define bands. There are very few bands in this day and age that have that, I don't want to use the word old school element, but that classic artistic and creative element where every song takes you on a whole different journey. In this genre that you belong to, that's even more rare because unfortunately, like all good music, eventually it becomes discovered, and most artists stay the same. They stay stagnant. They stay creatively non-experimental. Why don't you explain to myself and the audience the Atriarch ritual and what is the meaning of your creativeness?
Well, I mean, it's a complicated question, Jimmy. And thank you too for the compliment. And we see that too, the stagnation in music and in bands too that all sound the same, where they sound like another band, and they're just kind of doing this. Can't even think of the word for it. The same thing. Repetitive, but there's all these different bands with, they've got their different logos and they're from different cities, but if you played them for me back to back, I wouldn't be able to tell you who was who, and that's fine. People want to hear something familiar, but I've never wanted to create anything familiar, and I don't think any of us have wanted to create anything familiar. The four of us, we don't approach it as let's do something that we think we're going to want people to hear. We're doing this for ourselves. We're trying to create something that's going to make us feel better about, the world is a dark and lonely and scary and unforgiving place. And if we make this dark, bleak music, and people can find something in that to cling on to, and then that makes them feel better about it too. It makes us feel better about it. So the ritual has a lot to do with catharsis and like expelling these demons and getting this darkness out. And I'd say the originality is, that's just our creativity, and that's just us wanting to keep pushing ourselves and keep being more creative and not just do the same thing. That would be boring. It wouldn't be challenging. We like challenging ourselves.
There are many artists that say that they're trying to be creative, but in reality what they're doing is they're just following a shtick. The difference between Atriarch is when I've seen you numerous times, and I've been following the band for a while, looking for that. And what I am glad to discover is that it's genuosity. What you're doing on stage, when you're doing it on stage, is not only genuine, but it's different every creative time. In other words, there are many bands that you go see after, let's just say, 2 or 3 times, and you already know what is predictable. With Atriarch, not only is the live show not predictable, but even the sound and the imagery on vinyl. Does that concept go into when you're writing music and you're recording and you're playing? Are you deliberately trying to capture that, or is it all organic and natural?
It's a little bit of both. It's definitely an organic evolution as we grow, and like I said, as we push ourselves. But it's like I said, we are pushing ourselves, and we are trying to keep growing and changing. But at the same time, I think if you got the four of us together and just had us keep writing, it just wouldn't sound like we wouldn't write the same song twice. So I think it's both. Yeah.
Do you find it that the geographical part of the United States where you're from, which is Portland, again, not to sound stereotypical, but that area has always been known to be somewhat desolate and create original music. Do you think that a lot of that has to do with the area that you're in?
A little bit, yeah. It's also just the individuals. I feel like there's a lot of bands from Portland, especially now. Portland's growing. It's becoming very metropolitan, that sound like a lot of other bands. That there's a thrash scene there, and there's, it's got these kind of homogenized things about it too. But there's also some really cool original bands coming out of there, and there always has been. I remember a time in Portland when all the bands were weird, but it's definitely not like that anymore. Yeah, but that's kind of when I was growing up. So I think yeah, that does have something to do with it, because those were the bands that I was into as I was forming musically, and I was always into, weirder bands too. I liked The Birthday Party. I liked Christian Death. I never really hung on to these bands that were these kind of cookie cutter bands, that those other bands that sounded like them. That was never really my deal, or any of us really. We're all kind of into more artistic, weird music.
I would like to say that it's not really artistic, weird music. What it is it's human music. You mentioned Christian Death. You mentioned that genre of music, which is funny because I see elements of that in your music as it has progressed. Are you influenced a lot by the imagery, by the emotion, by the mystique of that type of music? Because aside from not only the death rock emotional purging, there really seems to be, and not to bust your balls or nothing, but there really seems to be some sort of revelation when you're up on stage. It's not a show, dude. It's like someone really going to another dimension, which is what makes your shows, each one, very captivating, interesting, and non-predictable.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. As far as my performance goes, I kind of feel like I have an evangelist kind of, where like you said, I believe what I'm saying, and I want you to hear it, and I'm projecting that, and I'm trying to, I definitely kind of lose myself and go to this spiritual place where I'm very open, and I'm feeling it, and it's very honest, and it's very true and real. It's hard sometimes to do that, every night after night, but it's very rewarding,
How do you do that though every night?
I believe it. I believe what we're about. I believe what I'm talking about. I believe in the guys that are standing behind me. I believe that if one person in the audience feels what we're talking about and what we're doing, it makes it all worth it. And that will energize me for the next performance every time.
Would you compare it similar to an American Indian, Native American tribal type of ritual? Because it kind of, again, every time I see you play, there always seems to be a portal opening, which is great, but there are very few artists that can genuinely do that sincerely.
Well, absolutely. That's what they were doing too. They were opening themselves up. They were trying to let in things from the ether that we don't see every day. They're trying to peel back the veil of the reality that is forced upon us, as to the hidden reality, the connection between things that we don't always see. And that's really what it's all about. Is this deeper connection, this thing that isn't obvious. Because everything that we do affects everyone around us. And if we act like assholes and we just, live our lives in this way where we're just consuming and we're just doing whatever we want for ourselves, that there's no love in that, and nothing positive is going to come from that. And if you start acting with openness and love, even if your life isn't great, and you have this shitty life as this loving, positive person, putting that positive energy out is still going to change and affect other things around you. And maybe you can take comfort in that, and that will make your life better. I don't necessarily believe in karma, but I definitely believe that putting out positivity and being open-minded is going to make the world a better place.